Hello and welcome back, everybody. We're incredibly excited that you're here. I am super excited about this next presentation. So Mackenzie Kerr is here with the University of South Florida in the College of Marine Science Brietbart Lab. And what she's going to be doing, she's going to be talking about DNA detectives from the USF College of Marine Science. Mackenzie, go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to talk to you today about my work. So again, my name is Mackenzie Kerr, and I am an outreach coordinator for the University of South Florida College of Marine Science in the Brietbart Lab. And so my work is literally about teaching you all about the oceans. And so my favorite activity to teach about is about my own research, fish eggs. And so today I'm going to teach you about fish eggs and about DNA. So I have a quick question for you all. I have some fish eggs in my hand here, and I'm wondering if you all have ever seen fish eggs before. So just think about it in your head. Have you ever seen fish eggs maybe on top of sushi, those little orange fish eggs? Or maybe you've even had caviar before if you're really fancy. I've never had caviar before, but I have had fish eggs on top of sushi. And also, if you've never seen them before, I have some right here. And so these are actual fish eggs that we've collected from the ocean. And so you can see them all right there. They're all little tiny little spheres. And so they are not alive, they're in alcohol, but you can see them right here. Lots of them. And if I were to ask you just by looking at this, could you tell me which fish they came from? Just think about that in your head. Are they all from the same fish? Are they from a bunch of different fish? And can you tell them apart? And I hope you're thinking in your head, no, because neither can I. And so we actually have to use what's called DNA to figure out which species of fish these eggs came from. And so that is what this whole activity is about. So you're going to become the DNA detectives of the sea today by figuring out which fish these eggs came from. So just think about it in your head again. How many of you love to eat fish? And if you're thinking so hard that you're raising your hand so high in your head right now, like me, that you love fish, that's awesome. But if you don't like fish and you're thinking, ew, nasty, then you at least know somebody that loves to eat fish. Because fish are about 17% of the whole entire world relies on fish as their major type of protein that they have to eat. And so that's a lot of people if you think about that. And even if you don't like to eat fish, you may like to look at them in an aquarium. You might like to look at them while you're swimming in the ocean, or you may just like have one at home as a pet. And so fish are really important for our environment, but also for people in general. So if we really love them and we really think they're important, then how do we protect them? Well, we need to protect all of their life stages. And so that's not just all the adults that you see, but what about the little babies out there? What about the kind of middle age, like the teenagers of the fish? We need to know where all of those are in the ocean to protect all those different life stages. You may be thinking to yourself, I have no idea what the life stages are of a fish, and that's okay because I am going to teach you right now. So most fish are what's called broadcast spawners, where they release their eggs into the water and they float to the surface. And so their life starts off as an egg. And so from that egg, they kind of float around in the ocean for about a day, and then they hatch into a larvae. And so those larvae are just little tiny little baby fish. You might not even be able to see them without a microscope. They're so tiny. And they kind of float around with the currents as well. They don't really have a lot of fins to swim. And then eventually they'll start to grow into a juvenile. And so a juvenile is just a kind of like the teenager version of a fish. And they can keep growing until they become the fully formed adult. And once they mature into an adult, they can release their own eggs into the water and the cycle begins again. So egg, larvae, juvenile, and adult. And so all of these different forms of the fish can be living in different areas of the ocean as they grow, even if the same species. So, for example, an egg could hatch into a larvae, and they could be in the water, just at the top of the water. Maybe they want to avoid predators, and so they're hiding in seagrasses and in mangrove leaves and mangrove roots. And so, as they grow and get bigger and stronger, and they can swim away, they can move out into the open ocean. And so we need to know where all of these fish are at any given time to make sure that they are safe. And so how do we study them? Well, I study the fish eggs, like I said, but how do you go about collecting fish eggs? Because as you can see, they are very tiny. Do you think I go in the ocean and use a magnifying glass to go look for them? Probably not. That would take forever and maybe be impossible. So the tool we use is a net. And so maybe you've seen one of these nets before, but this is called a plankton net. So here's a mini version right here. They're usually much bigger for a boat, but we have the little mini one here. It's just as functional. This part here attaches to a rope that we can throw off the back of the boat so we don't lose it. This big mouth part here is where the water goes through and goes all the way through to the end, where this one's broken, but just an example, where we have a jar connected. And so the jar is where it connects all the plankton and all of the eggs. So what are plankton? Some of you already know this, but if you don't, plankton are these little microscopic organisms that live at the surface of the water, and they can be plant-like organisms like algae, or they can be animal-like plankton like copepods, like this guy here, only a lot smaller. So you could think of copepods like the little guy from SpongeBob Plankton, who's got the little antlers. So all of those things are collected in this jar here, including the fish eggs. But if you're thinking just like I would be, if I threw this off the ship and collected the water into this little jar here, that would fill up super quick. So what's the point? Well, you can't tell, but there's a ton of little holes in this net. And so those little holes only let that water escape. So only the plankton are being collected. So the water escapes and the plankton and the eggs are collected in here. Once I have this jar full of tons of little organisms, what do we do with it? Well, I can't really see the eggs very well because look how tiny they are in comparison to this jar. There'd be lots of them in there at once. And so there's also lots of other algae and other little tiny animals, like little almost like bug-like animals in there. And we have to separate them. So we take it back to the lab. And in the lab, we have microscopes. And so I don't have a microscope here with me because I'm at home, but I do have a smaller version of a microscope called a dino light. And so this is the dino light here. That's got the magnification change here, a little camera in there so I can actually show you what we're gonna see right now. And then it plugs into my computer. So I'm gonna plug this in and we are actually going to look at some eggs under this dino light or a mini microscope. You can get the little better feel of what they look like under a microscope instead. So give me 2 seconds here. Awesome. So right now you're just seeing what my little table looks like up close. And so that's actually wood. So you can see how close this actually gets. And now I'm gonna show you some fish eggs. So let's get these fish eggs. There's a fish egg right there. And so you can see it doesn't really have a lot of features. It's just kind of a ball of cells. That's why it's so hard for us to identify them just by using their morphology or their features. And so another cool thing about using a microscope is that you can change the background color. So right now I'm using a black background, but I'm actually going to move this over so we can see what it looks like with a different colored background. So I'm going to just move it over to our wood area. And you can see how different the egg looks. You can actually almost see the little baby fish inside kind of forming. So different backgrounds really help us find those eggs because when there's all this other stuff in there for us to see, it's really hard to find them. And so it's kind of like a fish egg scavenger hunt is what I like to describe it as. So let me turn this off. Got to see the fish egg. And I want to show you what we use to pick them up. So instead of using our fingers, because that would be really difficult, they're so tiny, we use little tweezers. And so just like tweezers you would have at home if you had a splinter and you need to take it out, you would use tweezers. We use these little tiny tweezers to pick up the eggs to separate them from the sample. And so it's almost like picking up a balloon with chopsticks. It's pretty difficult, but also kind of fun. So I get to pick up little eggs with tweezers and do a scavenger hunt. So I would say my job's pretty cool. I don't know about you. So that is step one. We need to get those eggs from the other plankton samples and separate them. Once they're separated, we have to do a DNA extraction. So this activity is all about DNA. What is DNA? It is the genetic material that makes up all of us, and every single living organism in the whole entire world, no exception, has DNA. So plants have DNA, animals have DNA, and insects have DNA. Everyone has DNA. Bacteria have DNA. So because of this, we can use that DNA to identify our creatures. And so you can think about this kind of like a grocery store barcode. So you go to a grocery store, you pick up an item. For example, I have muffins here. You take this up to the counter and they scan the barcode on the back. The barcode is made up of a bunch of numbers, while our DNA is actually made up of letters, 4 letters to be exact, A, T, G, and C. And so instead of having this barcode that tells you what the product is, we have this letter code that can tell us what animal it is. And so everyone has a different code, and that's how we're all so different. We all have a different code and different organization of those letters. And it's lots and lots and lots of letters. But we can use a small amount of that code to figure out our different animals. So to simulate what we do in the lab, we're gonna do a DNA extraction using an egg like this. So we can't really do one with those tiny little fish eggs because you can't see it on the camera. So I'm gonna use this one here. So what we do is we break open the egg to release the DNA. And so, for example, here we have a string of beads as our DNA. Like I said before, those DNA codes are made up of 4 letters. As you can see here, these are 4 different colors: green, pink, yellow, and blue. And so we have to change this bead code into our actual DNA code. So I've created an online activity for you all to do, and you're not going to do it right now. I'm just going to show you what you would do online, and you can do it later on your own. So you can access this website through the St. Pete Science Fest website, through the marine science area, and you can find my section, which has that website. And so you can do that tomorrow when everything's all open. So this is what you would find on that website, is this DNA decipher code sheet. And so you can see those letters there with the different colors. And you change out that code from our beads to our letters. And so I've done that ahead of time so we don't have to wait for me to do the code myself. So I drew my little code on there instead of printing it out, and changed each of these letters into their correct code. So blue is A, green is C, pink is T, and yellow is G. And so I did that for us ahead of time. So now that we have a code, what do we do with it? Because it's just a bunch of letters to me. Well, we have a database for that. So just like when you Google something, you can find the answer. We have specific websites to look up those codes to figure out, kind of like a Google Translate of what our code means. So let me show you our website here, and you can come along with us to figure out which one of our codes matches up. So this is the website. It's what you would see on your own. And we've already done the part where we broke open the egg to release our DNA. We've deciphered our code using our sheet here. And now we need to figure out which fish it matches up to. So we have lots of codes here, but we know that ours starts with ACT. So we need to look for the same code that starts with ACT. So I see there's not this one, not this one. And we keep scrolling down until we find the correct one. I see it. I hope you all see it as well, that we have our flying fish here matches our code. So if I read out the first few letters of our code, we can see it matches. A, C, T, G, A, C, T, G, A, C, T. And that matches to the exact code that I just deciphered. And so we know that our egg came from a flying fish. And so from here on the website, we can actually print out a coloring page to color on our own, or you can color it on the website. And so there's a link to color your fish on the website. And so I can just show you here, if I pick whatever colors I want, and I can fill in our fish with whatever colors we want. And you can do this as many times as you want with as many fish as you want. You just gotta do the activity online. So we figured out how to identify our fish egg by using their DNA code. So that makes us DNA detectives of the sea. I hope you all will try it as well. And this simulates exactly what we would do in the lab. So matching up those eggs with that DNA code. And I want to show you some examples of fish we've actually found eggs from, because that is one of the most exciting parts of my job, is figuring out what these eggs actually match up to. And so let me show you here. We collect all of our eggs from the Gulf of Mexico. And if you're not familiar, the Gulf of Mexico is that huge body of water between the United States, Mexico, and Cuba. And so if we are here, right, in Pinellas County, and some of you might be other places, but we are here in Pinellas County in Florida, and the Gulf of Mexico is basically our backyard. So it's pretty easy to get to. We collect lots of eggs there using those plankton nets. And some of the eggs we've gotten include reef fish, like some of the ones you may have seen in an aquarium before. We've got the blue tang here, which is like dory, parrotfish, which eat things off of coral and actually can poop sand. We've got the wrasse and the butterfly fish. We've gotten eggs from fish that you've probably eaten before, like mahi-mahi, which I heard talked about earlier today, tuna, snapper, and grouper. We've also gotten eggs from fish you've probably never heard of or seen before, and I've actually never heard of or seen before until I did this research, including some of these guys here, like the luvar, who looks kind of funny, has a big forehead. And then we've got a plate fish, which is also called a peacock fish because of all the coloration, lanternfish that glow in the ocean and live kind of deep down, and moonfish. So there's lots of cool stuff here that we get eggs from every single fish out there. We actually don't need to have the adults to be able to figure out where these fish are living. And that's a really cool piece of this research, is it's really difficult to catch adult fish sometimes. You have to have the right kind of bait, you have to be at the right place at the right time. And sometimes they can be really hard to pull up on the line. They might break free. And so by catching these eggs, we can tell you that an adult has been nearby within the last day or two. And so that is an amazing piece of this research. We can really figure out where these fish are living, not just the adults, but the eggs as well. And so I hope this helps you understand how one way we can use to protect fish, knowing where all their life stages are. Once we know where they are, we know we can protect them. And so I will take questions here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mackenzie. That was excellent. So it is time for some questions and answers, and we're going to, get as many as we can in, and just don't get discouraged if we don't get to yours. We have over 3,300 students participating in school day. So please do submit them in, and we're going to get to as many as we can. And if we don't get to your question, what we're going to do is we will actually record all the questions and submit all the answers, all the different teachers. And so we'll try and get those answers back to you. So some of the questions coming in is first, well, how'd you get interested in fish eggs? Like what got you interested in, like, I want to study fish eggs?
I love that question. So it's actually pretty funny. I grew up in middle school and in high school. I was super interested in marine science because of these awesome camps. One of them including a camp that actually was hosted at University of South Florida. So if you are an 8th grader going into 9th grade, there's this amazing camp called the Oceanography Camp for Girls that is hosted at USF. And so if you're too young, great, wait for that time when you become an 8th grade girl going into 9th grade. You can participate in that camp as well. That interests me a lot in microscopes. I looked under a microscope at plankton for the first time, loved that. And then in high school, I became a diver. And so I actually did scuba diving, and I did a bunch of different fish counts where I would go to a reef and count how many fish in the different species. And so that put my love of fish and microscopes together with this work, and the DNA as well. I love that. And I met Maya, who is my advisor, through my undergraduate degree at University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. And so it's been a really great experience putting all these things together and to let me go to school at a place that's on the water and get to experience fish, their eggs, and the DNA side of it.
Okay. So with the eggs, what do you do with the eggs when you're done with them?
So I keep them for activities like this. Where'd I put it? So I can show you all. So this is actually a destructive process. So like I said, we have to break open the eggs to release the DNA. So these eggs have not been processed. So I've not actually done the DNA extraction on these ones. I don't know which fish they came from. The ones that we do use, you do not have the egg afterwards. So once we've opened the egg is gone. So after we've collected them, they're already dead. So we don't kill the eggs in the lab. They're actually already dead. So we do not release them back or anything like that. This is a destructive process. But fish release thousands and thousands of eggs all the time. And so this is only a very small portion of them. We're not hurting the populations by taking these eggs. And they also get eaten all the time by other fish and things. So don't worry about that.
So how much of the world population, we know, a lot of people eat fish, but do you have any idea? Can you tell us how much of the world, like how much fish is eaten by the world's population?
I do not know that number off the top of my head, but I know it's tons and tons of fish. So just think about Florida. Florida, we have access to the fish because we're surrounded almost all the way by water. And so this is one of the best areas for people to come out and to go fishing, to come eat at our restaurants where we have this fresh fish brought in. And so for me, I eat fish usually 1 to 2 times a week. And so some people have to eat it every day because that's all the protein they have access to. So they don't have cow meat or chicken meat, or they may not even have things to have a vegetarian diet. So they actually will go for fish every single day because that's where they live and that's what they have access to. And so it really depends on where someone's living. If it's a landlocked state, they might have access to freshwater fish, or they may not have access to fish at all. So it depends on where you're living, but lots and lots of fish get eaten every day. And so we have to know where they're living to protect, to make sure we're not taking too many of them so they can grow back their populations to survive, and so that we can keep going back and eating them.
So that's why with using the eggs, we DNA code them to see who's there. And if we're not seeing any of this particular type anymore, maybe we should stop fishing this particular type in this area.
Right, we can do more research to figure out where maybe they've gone somewhere else, they've moved, or maybe they're not there at all anymore.
Are there ever any eggs that you don't use? And if so, what do you do with them that you
Yeah,
don't
so like
DNA
I
code?
said, these are extra eggs that I didn't use, and so I use them to teach people about this research and to show everyone about them, because how cool are they? It's like a little ice globe.
Now, can they grow into fish if you were to keep them somewhere? I know you said those were in
No,
alcohol.
yeah, so we preserve them immediately on the ship and in alcohol. And so that is so they don't rot. And so just like rotten eggs, like they smell horrible. Like if any of this plankton or these eggs rot, it's really disgusting smelling. And then when we go to pick them out of the microscope sample, we're smelling that all the time. And so we preserve them as best as possible on the ship.
So when you were talking about the different types of fish, you said that one of the fish poop sand. Do
Yeah.
all fish do that? Is it just that one? And if so, what's so special about that one?
I love that. I love that. So yes, the parrotfish will eat algae off of coral reefs. And so sometimes they accidentally eat pieces of the coral. And so as they're digesting, they will poop out sand because it's just small pieces of that coral. And so that is the only fish I'm aware of that does that, but I'm sure there are other fish that might have it. It's just they have these specialized teeth, like almost like a parrot beak, that can allow them to eat that material. And so that is why it's such a fun fish.
So did scientists, I guess, observe this either in the wild and
Yeah, so parrotfish are very common on reefs because that's where they
okay.
eat. And so if you dive, I've dove and seen these parrotfish before, and you can actually watch them eat. I've never actually seen them poop out the sand, but I know that other people have
Okay.
watched it. I'm sure there's YouTube videos out there.
Do you have a favorite fish, and what makes that your favorite fish?
I get asked this question all the time, and it's really hard for me because I love fish so much. I just love they're so different. The one that I usually use as my example of one of my favorite fish is the flying fish. So the example I actually used for this presentation, because they have these fins that allow them to kind of glide out of the water to escape predators. And so they'll jump from a wave into another wave and kind of glide between to get away from those other fish trying to eat them. So I think they're so cool, and I've seen them in person while on research cruises.
Very cool. All right, so we're going to wrap up a little bit, but I have one more question. If you wanted to send a message to girls getting interested in STEM, what would you tell them?
Try everything. I tried a lot of different research. I tried, I worked with a lot of different people. I did a lot of different activities until I figured out what I really wanted to do. And so I figured out I really love teaching kids and adults about science, and I also love research. And so my job puts both of those together. And so I've done this by doing these activities, by going out and talking to people. And so the more you try, the more different activities you do, the more camps you participate in, that is how you're going to figure out what you love.
Wonderful. Mackenzie, thank you very much for your time. I loved the session that you gave. So thank you again. And for those of you tuning in, thank you for joining us. We're very happy that you're here. And you're welcome to stay for the next session on this track or feel free to change into a different track. Thank you. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.